It is time to touch on something really important in Excel, probably the most fundamental concept, but also not very difficult. It is actually a very easy concept. However, it is really important to grasp that concept deeply and know precisely how to work it. Now, I don't have to tell you anymore that you will really benefit from this lecture, just like any lecture offered by this course, if you follow me and do what I do. So the concept I was going to talk about is called relative versus absolute references. Let me show you, and then I will explain what it is. I am using the relative versus absolute.xlsx sample file, and I'm on the relative and absolute tab of this workbook. So here I have a bunch of numbers. I have a column of sales numbers. I'm going to type something in column B. I'm going to basically do a really simple formula that does not calculate anything. Instead, it is pointing at a cell. So let me give you one example. Equal sign, and I'm in cell B3. And now I'm going to reference the cell on the left-hand side, cell A3. I was using arrow key to move there. So this is it. This is the formula. Equal sign A3. I'm going to hit Control-Enter to accept the change. And you probably knew already what would happen. It is basically just showing me what's inside that cell, say cell A3. So let me copy this formula now, and to copy it, I'm going to double click on the fill handle. It will copy the formula down. Notice what happened when I copy it down. Each one of the cells in column B is showing what's in the cell on the left-hand side. So the original formula was equal sign A3, and then the next one becomes equal sign A4. And the next one is equal sign A5. Now the original formula was equal sign B3. However, when I copy it, it is changing the reference of the formula. Let me now do the same thing, but in a slightly different manner. In column E, I'm going to click on cell E3, and I'm going to type equal sign, and I'm going to reference the cell on the left-hand side, just like before, D3. However, I'm going to put my insertion point before D, reference to column D, and type $. And now I'm going to click between D and 3, put the insertion point right before the row reference, row 3, and type the $. Now I'm going to hit Control-Enter, and I got the same result. I got the reference. I got a formula that is pointing at the cell on the left-hand side. Now I'm going to copy this formula. And something really curious happens. When I copy this formula down that has $signs in the cell references, it is pointing at the same cell. Notice the original formula was equal sign, $D, $3. Now the next one, when I copy it, is also $D, $3. So it is pointing at the same cell. It is actually referencing the same cell. So this is the difference between relative references and absolute references. In column B, we have relative references. And when we have relative references, when we copy the formula with relative references, the reference changes. It is not pointing at exactly the same cell. It is pointing at the cell in the same direction and the same distance on the cell on the, in this case, cell on the left-hand side. When we have absolute references, we are always pointing at the same cell in this case. Now let me copy this formula from column B, Control C. Let's say I'm going to copy it to some cell down below, right here, Control V. Now it shows me 0. Question is, why is it 0? If I double click on the formula, it is actually pointing at the cell on the left-hand side. So it is relative reference. If I copy the formula from column E though, Control C, and let's say I place it right here, or maybe right here, and do Control V. Now, it is still pointing at the same cell. Let's take a look at it. It's still $D, $3. So that's the difference between relative and absolute references. A cell reference is technically two references. It is column reference and row reference, B3, A3, D4, and so on. So each one of them can have a $sign in front of it or not have a $sign in front of it. And if it doesn't have a $sign, it's a relative reference. And if it does have a $sign, it's an absolute reference. This concept is absolutely crucial, but it is relatively easy. Let me give you an example why it is important. Let's click on the Sales tab. Okay, here I have a little spreadsheet that has a bunch of salespeople in one column and the amount of money that they bring in. And I have commission rate in cell E1. So in column C, I would like to calculate what is the amount of commission that each one of these salespeople needs to make. I need to pay these people the commission that they have earned by bringing in this amount of sales. So the formula is easy. Now we know how to do formulas. We just do equal sign and reference cell on the left-hand side, which is the amount of sales by this particular person. Now I'm going to multiply by the commission rate, which is in cell E1. That is really easy. That's the formula. Equal sign B4 times E1. Now, what if I accept the change? Well, this is the amount of money that I need to pay according to the commission rate. And the commission rate is 0.15, which is 15% in decimal notation. Now, what if I copy this formula down now? I will double-click on the fill handle to do that. And it is not working. The reason it is not working is the incorrect cell references in my formula. Let's see. The original formula is correct. It is giving me the right amount of commission that I need to pay this guy, John Smith. Now, the next one, if I look at the formula, it is no longer correct. It is referencing cell B5, which is good, but then it is referencing cell E2 instead of the cell E1. So what I need to do, I needed to think ahead a little bit when I was creating this formula, and I realized that I always need to reference cell E1 in that formula. So let me modify my formula. I'm going to delete all of these copied results. And I will modify the formula. Remember F2, edit formula. I can click on the formula bar. I can hit F2, or I can simply double click on the cell itself. Now what I need instead of E2, I need $E, $2, most likely. So there's a nice shortcut to remember for that. F4. F4 will toggle references. E1, $E, $E1, $1. Now E, $1, and $E1, and again to E1. I would probably select this one, $E, $1. That will make absolute cell reference, absolute column reference, and absolute row reference, which will make it absolute cell reference. Now I'm going to Control Enter and copy it down. And sure enough, it is working quite nicely. Let me use something called formula auditing tools. I'm going to trace precedence. So this formula is taking precedence from B4 and from E1. And when I copy the formula, and if I trace precedence, it is now correctly taking the precedence from B7, in this case, and from E1. So E1 stays E1 no matter where I copy the formula. And that's the necessity and the importance of relative and absolute references. let me remove arrows and give you another example. What if I would like to see what percent share each one of these salespeople brings in on the table, to the table? I'm going to calculate the total here. And we already did some functions. I'm going to use AutoSum in this case. It is really easy to use. I'm going to simply click on AutoSum, and you can get the AutoSum option on the Formulas tab, or you can also get it on the Home tab, and it doesn't matter which one you choose. I'm going to click on AutoSum. The AutoSum will provide a suggested range, and in this case the range is correct, and I'm going to accept it. So this is the total sales. So this is the total revenue sold by all of the salespeople. Now, what I would like to do, I would like to calculate the percent share that each one of these salespeople brings in to the table. Well, the formula is really easy. We want to calculate percent share. We take the piece of the pie divided by the whole pie and express it in percentage. So I'm going to do equal sign, piece of the pie, cell B4, divided slash by the whole pie. And again, at this point, you already know that we need to do something with B13, because when we copy this formula down, we really want to make sure that B13 is always B13 and it doesn't become B14, B15, B16, and so on. So I'm going to use F4 in order to put $, $B, $13. That will log the reference. It will make absolute reference to the cell B13 in my formula. I'm going to accept the change. And now I can double click on the fill handle in order to copy the formula. And it is working correctly. Of course, it is not expressed in percentages. In order to do that, I need to click apply percent style. And I can do it from the Home tab and from the Numbers formatting group. Now notice that when I point at the percent style, it shows me a shortcut, Control-Shift-%. That means I can use Control-Shift and percent instead of clicking. Let me do that. Control-Shift-%. And now I have my percent share for each of the salespeople. Let me give you one last example. Let's click on the area sheet. In this case, I would like to create a quick calculation spreadsheet that will give me a multiplication table, area calculation. So first, let me type 1 in this yellow cell, cell A4. And then I would like to fill numbers down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. I will do it by using a formula. There are many ways to do that in Excel, a couple of ways to do it in Excel. I'm going to use a formula. So in cell A5, I'm going to type equal sign and hit arrow up, referencing the cell above, and I will do +1. So what I want to do is I want to reference the cell above and say +1. Whatever is in cell up there, +1. Show me a value, 1 that is increased by 1, and it gives me 2. Now I can simply click and drag by the fill handle and copy that formula down. And what happens, due to relative references, each one of those cells is giving me +1. So this one is A4 +1, and the next one is A5 +1, and the next one is A6 +1, and so on. So that is a really useful way to fill numbers by using formulas. Let me do the same thing on the right-hand side here. Actually, I don't have to rebuild the formula. What I can do, I can double-click on the cell A5 where I had the original formula and copy the formula. Now, I'm not copying the cell, I'm copying the actual formula. So I'm going to select the formula, Control-C, and now hit Escape. And now here I go into the edit mode and I do Control-V to paste. It is the same formula. It is giving me what's in cell A4 +1, only now it is working horizontally. Now I'm going to click and drag by the fill handle to fill it like that. Okay, so I have a column of digits or numbers, and I have a row of numbers, and I would like to create a multiplication table or area calculation table. So I'm going to create a formula in cell B5, equal sign, and I'm going to reference the cell on the left-hand side first, A5, multiplied, and I'm going to reference the cell above, B4. So this is basically 2 times 2, really easy formula, and I'm going to accept it. Now, I would like to be able to copy this formula into the whole range in order to create a multiplication table. But if I do it now, it's not going to work. Let me show you. Control C, copy active, the marching ends are marching. Now I'm going to hold Shift key and click on this cell J18 to select the range. Shift click. And now what I can do Control V, which will paste the formula. And it is not working. I'm going to hit escape and show you why it's not working. The original formula is correct. However, the references are not correct. So when I copy the formula, instead of referencing the cell in row 4 and the cell in column A, it is referencing the cell above and the cell on the left-hand side. So I needed to modify this formula. Let me undo and do the formula again. So for A5, let me actually start from scratch. I'm going to get rid of it. Equal sign, the cell on the left-hand side. Now I need to stop and think. When I copy this formula to the right, I want column A to stay column A, which means I need a $ in front of column A. But when I copy this formula down, I want row 5 to become row 6, 7, so I don't need a $. I'm going to use the F4 key a couple of times. $A5 multiplied, and I'm going to reference the cell above. Now I need to stop and think again. When I copy this formula down, I want 4 to always be 4, no matter where I copy it. But when I copy it horizontally, I want B, column B, reference B, to become C, D, E, and so on. So I'm going to use F4 again. And this is what I have. $A5 multiplied by B, $4, which means absolute column A, a relative row 5, multiplied by a relative column B, absolute row 4. And that's the formula. Let me copy it now. I'm going to do Control C. Now I'm going to hold Shift. I want to select the whole range here, so I'm going to hold Shift and click on J18. And now I will do single paste. I'm going to hit Enter, which is single paste. Instead of Control V, if I don't need to paste after this action, I can simply hit Enter. And it is working quite nicely. Any one of them is referencing the correct row and the correct column. So the original formula, if I were using the formula auditing tools here, trace precedence, the original formula is A5 times B4. Now when I copy it, each one of these copied formulas is taking the values as input from the correct cells, from row 4 and from column A. And that's what relative and absolute references are about. They are really, really important, absolutely important. But as you can see, they are relatively easy. So we will bump into them quite a few times, and you will bump into relative and absolute references a lot in your work. You receive a spreadsheet from someone, you will find relative absolute references. Now, without knowing about relative and absolute references, I would have to create a formula for every single cell in this spreadsheet. I would not be able to copy the formula that I create. So it's a real time saver. And I will see you in the next lecture.